Welcome to Rethinking a Dollar. Today I'm excited to have my guest, Mr. Andrew Higgins, an independent investor, trader, and analyst. Today, Mr. Higgins will share his thoughts on the global economy as well as the future of fiat currencies. Andrew is a monetary enthusiast and author that's passionate about educating others on the pending monetary shift taking place right before our very eyes. So, Andrew, welcome to Rethinking a Dollar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you taking time to sit down with us. Looking forward to diving into and getting your thoughts on what's happening. And we have a lot of news is always occurring, such as right now today, the Dow Jones hit 20,000 for the first time. So we'll definitely try to cover that as well. But before I get into actually some detailed questions, I tend to start off with rethinking the dollar questions. And the first question is, what comes to mind when Andrew Higgins hears the words rethinking the dollar?
Well, people think the dollar is money, and the dollar stopped being money in about 1971 when Nixon took away the gold backing of the dollar. So right now the dollar is a currency, and no currency system has ever lasted more than about 40 years. So we're kind of beyond our expiration point, and the reason we have lasted so long is because of the dollar-petrol relationship that Nixon took away the gold backing of the dollar and essentially backed the dollar with oil in the early 70s through a deal with Saudi Arabia. And that relationship is probably what was behind the war in Iraq and the war in Libya. And the relationship has quickly fallen apart worldwide. When Saddam Hussein stopped taking, he was kind of a jerk for a long time, but when he stopped taking oil or U.S. dollars for his oil, then we invaded shortly after that. And the same thing with Gaddafi in Libya. And now numerous other countries all around the world are stepping out of the dollar. I wrote an article called Got Gold that I put on LinkedIn, and you can see a chart on there, and it shows all the countries all around the world. They're doing international deals outside of the U.S. dollar in larger and larger numbers almost every day.
Yeah, so it basically sounds like a lot of countries have already begun rethinking the dollar. So kind of ironic that's the name of the show as well. But how important is it for citizens and just your everyday commoner, those who deal with Federal Reserve notes and other currencies, to begin taking interest in monetary matters at this particular point in history?
Well, people need to understand that the U.S. dollar is a debt-backed paper instrument. The dollars in your pocket are debt. It's not real. It's not a real asset. And the dollars in your bank account, they go one step further when they've passed all these laws now for the bail-ins. The next banking crisis, they're not going to bail out the banks. They're going to do bail-ins and take the depositors' money. The depositors' money is considered like, if you have money in your local bank, you're an investor in that bank. And it's just like if I started a company and you gave me $1,000 and the company made money, well, then we're doing good. If the company goes belly up, you're out your $1,000, and that's how your deposit is at the bank. So people need to understand that their money is not money; it's currency. It's and this currency is not going to. No currency system has ever lasted. I think the average is around 40 years in world history, and the one that we're in now is coming to an end. The rest of the world is. Already, look at the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Almost every country in the world has joined that, with China being the lead. The last century was the American century. This century looks like it's going to be the American century, but I believe it's going to pivot towards Asia. I think it's already happening. It's been happening for a while. And World War III has already started. World War II didn't start on December 7th. World War II started with FDR imposing sanctions on the Japanese, and there are all kinds of things. The Flying Tigers went over to China, and all of those kind of things are happening now. We're involved in currency wars. We're involved in energy wars, trade wars, proxy wars in the Ukraine and also in Syria. It's all happening now. And there was that book, The Art of War, that was written in China, 1,000 years ago or something.
Right.
It says if your enemy is bigger than you, you should attack his economy first, and then you won't be able to support a big military. And basically, that's what's happening right now. The rest of the world, China, Russia, they're building massive amounts of gold, and they're doing trade deals all over the world. And really, those are the beginning of World War III. It's just hasn't got to a direct shooting conflict, although we do have special forces in Syria, and they have had casualties. So the beginning of an actual shooting war is already taking place.
Wow. Wow. So that's leads right into my next question. If Andrew Higgins was given a chance to kind of deliver the global state of the union or global state of the economy, monetary system address, what all would it entail and why?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is educate people on the gold standard and how the system is. It's a currency system. It's not a money system. The whole Federal Reserve System is kind of a Ponzi scheme. And once people figure that out, then we need to change it. And the problem is, changing it is not going to be fun. Lots of people are going to lose lots of money, and there's going to be a lot of pain. And Americans in particular, people don't like pain. So, look what happened in Iceland when they had their collapse back in 2008. They voted not to bail out the banks, and their currency collapsed. Their economy was in bad shape. But within a few years, they're recovering. The rest of the world, we're just kicking the can down the road and making all the problems worse. We're manipulating the markets. The Fed policy to lower interest rates just manipulates the markets. They're manipulating the gold prices down, manipulating the dollar prices higher. The dollar could go higher from here. I think in the short term, it's going to go lower. But at some point, the whole thing is just going to collapse. People need to be educated on what's going on, because if you just tell someone they're going to experience pain and you don't explain why, then people aren't going to do it. So in a way, I think we're just kind of screwed, because most people aren't that educated about what's happening. And the debt problems, all the issues that are facing us are so huge that it wouldn't matter if Trump or Hillary Clinton or whoever's in charge, it's like if I owed you $100, I'd pay you. If I owed you $1,000, maybe we'd work out a payment plan. But if I owe you $1 trillion, you're screwed. I'll give you the name and phone number to my bankruptcy attorney. You're not going to get your money, and that's kind of how much we owe. It's beyond. The debt is beyond our ability to pay it back. And the only, Trump alluded to this when he was running for president, that in some of his deals he paid people pennies on the dollar for what he owed him. He renegotiated his deal. And people say, well, we'll do that with the debt. But that involves a resetting of the value of the dollar. If we're going to pay people pennies on the dollar, then the dollar will become worth pennies on the dollar as well.
Right.
So people don't understand that. They just think, well, we're not going to have to pay all that debt. And the way the Federal Reserve System works, the debt can never be repaid. The way the Fed is basically prints up money and they loan it to the government. They give it to the government and loan it at interest. So the government gives the Fed bonds in exchange for money. This is like a oversimplified version of what happens. So then say you have $1 trillion in the economy and you decide you want to pay off the debt. Well, where do you get the trillion to pay off that debt? Well, you get it from the Fed. So you borrow another trillion from the Fed, pay off the first trillion, and guess what? You're still $1 trillion in debt to the Fed. The way that the Constitution was written, only the government had the authority to create money, and gold and silver were money. Right. So the way the system is now, it's a Ponzi scheme. If you ever hear a politician say he's going to pay off the debt, and he's not talking about going to a gold standard, he's either ignorant or he's lying.
Wow, good point. Now, you mentioned that, hinted at, no one individual. You mentioned, Hillary, if she had been president, but yet we have President Donald Trump, who's a week into office now, and he's already begun doing a lot of things that cause a lot of people to, really pay attention to, with all these executive orders and things like that. So give us your thoughts on, the first couple days of his decision making, and what kind of decisions do you see him needing to make looking ahead to really begin to try to get some type of, balance back to our crazy monetary world we're living in?
Well, let me tell you. So far he's done some things like with the TTP, or TPP. All of these things he's fulfilling campaign promises. So I guess that's a good thing. I mean, most politicians, whether you like them or not, they don't fulfill their campaign promises. He's talking about draining the swamp, and he's put some people in key positions that are in favor of going to a gold standard, but he's also put some big investment banking guys in key positions who and some people might say that these guys are, he's just getting rid of the liberal people in the swamp and putting more conservative people in the swamp. So I don't know, and maybe some of these guys are going to be really good in their position. Time will tell. You look back on what FDR did when he put Kennedy in charge of the stock market, and he was one of the biggest stock scammers, before that. But everybody said that was crazy, but actually he did a good job because he knew all the scams and he fixed everything. So we don't really know what's going to happen. I hope he does drain the swamp, and I hope he does make some changes. There's the economy goes in cycles. It's almost like we have winter, spring, summer, fall, and it just goes in cycles about every 7 or 8 years. You can follow it. There's people that do studies on the Shemitah in the Bible, and they follow this Shemitah cycles. There's other guy, Martin Armstrong. He does based on the number, mathematical number pi. It's a little more than 8-year cycles, and it's amazing how accurate these cycles are. And right now we're going into what, like Harry Dent does cycles research also, and he does a lot of work on population demographics, and he calls it a winter season. And that's basically what we're going into now. And if the economy goes belly up, it's a process that's been happening for a long time. Trump will probably get blamed for it if it happens on his watch, and I think it's going to happen in the next 6 months to 2 years.
So let me interrupt for a second. So what does a winter season look like? What is this correction, or I'm assuming you're hinting at a recession being announced and the consequences from it. But what does a winter season look like?
Well, I'll tell you, it would have been a recession if we had let it happen naturally. But because we've kicked the can down the road and we've done all this manipulation, it's like a spring, and we're just pushing it back and pushing it down. And at some point, the pressure's so much that it's just going to explode. And I think we're in for what will be the largest, biggest depression in the history of the world. I think it'll make the 1929 depression look like, the Cub Scouts or something.
Biggest depression in the history of the world. That is pretty strong. That is pretty bad.
If you look at the cycles, here's the scary thing: the war cycles are all peaking, and the economic cycles are going the opposite way. When everybody's making money, they're more interested in having a good time and raising their families and that kind of thing and enjoying life. But when you're not making money, you're kind of upset and unhappy, and that's when the war cycles go higher. And the scary part is you can look at these guys that do the seismo research, and they're accurate most of the time. I mean, some of these guys have really astounding accuracy rates, and you can just pull out a calendar and just look at the cycles, and it's like, you can't predict to the exact day when something's going to happen, but it's a seasonal thing. Just like, you can't say, well, winter's coming, it's going to rain, next Thursday at, or 2 months from now on Thursday, because that's when winter comes. But you can definitely predict the cycles.
Right, that does make sense. It does make sense. Now, I want to talk about our debt. I just looked at the debt clock last night, actually, and it's approaching $20 trillion. And I would assume no one could have ever imagined having reached such a large number. And in our little pre-talk, we were talking about how nobody really seems to care much about the debt and how high it's going and how do you repay it back or how do you not repay it back and the consequences of not repaying it back. So how much do you see this $1 trillion stimulus, or not stimulus, but expansion package is kind of being proposed for infrastructure building, things like that? How would that, it's going to get us above 20, probably closer to 21 within Trump's first year or two. And so how will I feel to continue to rise? At what point does our creditors say, hey, enough is enough? We can't no longer support your debt problem, your debt habit. What does it look like, feel like, in your opinion?
Well, that's already happening. China's been selling massive amounts of billions of dollars worth of U.S. treasuries. I don't know who's buying them. I think the bond market has already gone belly up, and I think that there's black op funds out there buying the bonds, or the Fed is monetizing the bonds and just printing up paper to buy the bonds. I think I think the bond market's already gone belly up. It's like having a relative that's on heroin and keeps asking to borrow money and is homeless. And at some point, you just you realize that you're just enabling them. America, even if Trump wasn't first off, Trump's right. We need to throw probably, I don't know how much, but probably he's right, about $1 trillion at our infrastructure, our roads, our sewage systems, water. All our infrastructure is in some cases almost 100 years old and falling apart. So we need to do that. But at the same time, we don't have the money. There's a guy that has a website, shadowgovernmentstats.com.
Shadowstats.com.
Yeah,
John Williams,
he does the stats the way the government used to do them when Carter was president. And in one of his newsletters, he said, I forget what it was, but like counting just the military and Medicare, there's a deficit. If you taxed Americans at 100% of their earnings, all Americans, the rich, the poor, everybody, there'd still be a deficit. So, I mean, how do you fix that kind of a problem? I mean, it's we need to spend the money, but the only way we can spend the money is if we print more and go deeper in debt. Reagan did that, and we went in debt. But when Reagan was president, the economy was in much better shape, and we didn't have as much debt. Now, you're talking 19, 20, $21 trillion, but that doesn't count the unfunded liabilities. If you did your accounting for your personal finances the way the government did, I mean, it would be ludicrous. You wouldn't do it that way. And if you did and you filed your taxes that way, you'd be thrown in jail or fined or something. If you count the unfunded liabilities, the numbers go, depending on who you look at, whose numbers you look at, like 70 to 120 trillion. I mean, the debt is just, we're making promises that can't be fulfilled, there's just no way that they can be fulfilled. So, I think we need to do the infrastructure spending, but at the same time, we don't have the money. We don't realize, everything that you see around you, it's all based on debt. And debt is not wealth. Americans think that debt is wealth. If I go out and buy a Rolls Royce and, buy a house, in $1 million neighborhood, people look at that. Oh, look, he must be doing well. And, a lot of those people driving around in those cars are like a couple paychecks away from bankruptcy.
Right.
And Americans, if I own that Rolls Royce in that house, well, there's some wealth there. But it's not wealth when it's owned by the bank or it's all debt.
Wow. So
and even our money, people think, well, I don't have any debt. I have a whole bunch of money in the bank. Well, your money is debt. And if you put it in the bank, it's not even debt. It's like you're investing in the bank. It's Americans are going to learn the hard way that debt is not wealth.
Right. Speaking of getting out of debt and being debt free, there's a lot of people, mainstream media guys that I follow that kind of help me in my financial process of getting myself, on track. And so the whole thought is to get out of debt. You don't want to be in heavy debt, live beyond your means, live within your paycheck means and things like that. And so the goal is to just get out of debt. But my thought is, how can you be out of debt when your national currency is a debt? And so the fact that you hinted at that, I mean, I think that's powerful, because most people have no clue that their currency is a debt in and of itself, and that even if you store it and save it and try to invest it, it ultimately, as history has shown, all fiat currencies eventually return to their original intrinsic value of zero. So how do you explain that to people is the hard part.
Well, gold and silver are money. So if you want to have some money, buy some gold and silver. I think silver, I think in the next crisis, gold might go up 500%. Silver is going to go up maybe 2,000%, and the good, bright mining stocks will go up 10,000 to 35,000%. That's what's going to happen. Silver's the big banks, J.P. Morgan and Scotia Bank, and especially are massively shorting the silver market. It's manipulating the price lower, and at the same time that J.P. Morgan has the largest physical stockpile of silver in the history of the world. Even if you go back to ancient times and look at how much gold and silver different empires had, J.P. Morgan's position is huge, and the Chinese are right behind them in their position of physical silver. All they have to do to make the price of silver go up is pull off all their shorts, and the price will, just go to the moon. I think personally, silver is going to go over $1,000 an ounce. You can buy it today; it's about $17. With a premium, maybe $20. I would buy just bullion silver. You can buy the American Eagle bullion coins. I personally like the Vienna Philharmonics because they're a little, they come in a smaller footprint. If you want to hide them in a safe or something, they're a little smaller than the American Eagles. But the American Eagles are more popular because it's an American coin. But $20, you can buy a 1 ounce coin that might be worth $1,000 in 6 months.
Right.
You know.
Okay. Now, speaking of which, we're talking about precious metals, and so that basically, sound money is real money at the end of the day. And so I just finished posting a video in regards to Trump and his past dealings and history of him being known as a kind of a sort of a gold bug, and so it was entitled, Trump and the New Gold-Backed Dollar. And so, what are your thoughts about Trump? He clearly knows what's happening. He kind of ran his campaign on the fact that we're in big trouble. And so, what do you think his thoughts might be? Just, of course, we'll never know until time reveals itself. But what do you think his thoughts might be on gold and possibly, auditing the Fed or, auditing Fort Knox officially? Or what are your thoughts on gold and Trump?
Well, all I know is what I've seen him say. And I've read a couple of Trump's books, and there's things about Trump that I really like. I think he knows a lot more about business and the economy than Hillary Clinton knows or knew or whatever. But I've seen him say that it'd be great to be on a gold standard. Let me say something. Several of the founding fathers have been quoted as saying that the primary reason for the American Revolution was because the British government was trying to put us into a currency system, and they wanted to go they knew that would lead to slavery. And they didn't want, debt. They call them debt slaves or wage slaves. So that's why the primary reason why they had the American Revolution. And now we're in a position where that's exactly what we've given ourselves, is the main thing we fought against the British to avoid, and now America has that. But I think Trump thinks that a gold standard would be a good thing. He, like I said earlier, he's put a couple of key people into positions that are, these people are in favor of a gold standard. The problem is, Trump just can't declare a gold standard. He can't even, I don't think he can even declare an audit of the Fed. It has to be an act of Congress, and the Congress is only as smart as the people that elected them. I read somewhere that when Ron Paul was a congressman, he had a meeting with other congressmen in his office about QE. And one of the congressmen, before the meeting started, raised his hand and he said, "Before we start, I'd just like to know what QE means." So these congressmen, but why should he know? I mean, the people electing him, half of those people that are voting probably don't know what QE means either.
Right.
So he's just a reflection of the people that are putting him in office. And then Ron Paul said that one of the congressmen thought the U.S. dollar was still backed by gold. And these are people voting and making kind of key decisions in our lives, and they don't have a clue. Well, the problem is the people that are voting for him don't have a clue either. Most people don't know that the dollar, it's like hidden in plain sight, that the dollar is not real money.
Right. Now, I can imagine, I can kind of imagine some questions out there. Some people are for and recognize the history of gold in our monetary system and say that, going back to it won't solve our problems. It's all about the interest rates. And so I recently read or came across an article title mentioning that the reason why interest rates will never normalize to that 3, 4, 5, or whatever it might be percentage points is because of 19 plus $20 trillion in debt. Just the cost alone at trying to sustain it would be unbelievable and unbearable. And so what are your thoughts about interest rates? Do you think kind of normalizing that or slowly but surely creeping back up to what would be considered normal rates would help or bring everything down?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess, interest rates are going to go higher, I believe. But then the Fed kind of they don't have a choice. They have to keep them low because, like you say, if the government, if the interest rates went to where the fair market would put them, the government would, the amount they'd be spending on the debt just to service the interest on the debt would be astronomical. I mean, it's like a catch-22. If they raise interest rates, then it kills the economy, it kills the government. If they don't raise interest rates, it causes if you have low interest rates, everybody thinks low interest rates are really great. But here's the problem. Look at the pension funds. Pension funds have to invest, they have to invest in bonds. And so, I'm retired from California Public Employees Retirement Fund, CalPERS. They have to make about 7.5% a year to be able to pay everybody. And I think last year or last quarter, they made around 3%, something like that. They can't make enough money if there's negative interest rates. It's going to cause a huge pension crisis, and it's already showing up in in places all across the country, in private pensions and public pensions. Most of the public pensions are belly up. So, I mean, they're negative. They can't. There's a huge pension crisis that's coming, and it's already showing up, but it's going to get much worse over the next year or two, and it's going to be headline news. It's already been in the news a little bit, but so if you and I want low interest rates, maybe you're young enough, you don't have to worry about your pension for a while, but basically you're screwing your parents because their pensions are going to be screwed. So low interest rates aren't necessarily, I mean, it's good if you want to go be a borrower and you want to borrow some money, or if you have money on your credit card and you don't want to, you want to run a balance on that, but it's bad in other ways. It's the economy is complicated, and when you try to manipulate it in certain ways, it never works. The Soviet Union tried to manipulate and centrally plan their economy, and it didn't work. I don't believe it's worked ever in the history of the world where you try to manipulate an economy, and that's basically what the Fed is doing. They probably should have raised interest rates back in 2009 when the economy was doing better, and then at this point now they could be in a position where they could lower them again. But I think I think interest rates are going to go higher. The Fed doesn't control everything. They can control the interest rates they charge the banks. But if I'm going to loan you money, maybe I'm not going to charge that low of a rate. I'm going to ask for a higher rate. Once inflation arrives, and it's already showing up, then interest rates it's going to be an interesting thing that's going to happen to interest rates.
Wow. All right. You said so. Once inflation shows up, that leads to my next question about inflation. Like CPI, according to Labor Statistics Bureau, whatever, says 1.9, maybe just hit 2.1, a type of thing. And though I had a prior guest who actually specializes in index geared towards big metropolitan areas, calculating the actual CPI, inflation rate, and it's closer to 9, 10, 11, depending on what city you're in. And so, do you think that the truth will eventually come out by accident, as far as people saying, hey, why is my groceries overnight went up? Or do you think that eventually Trump might, or the people he put in office may kind of start dishing out real figures?
Well, that'd be nice if Trump put out real figures. He'd have to go back in time, because the real figures would show, like you say, if you do the stats the way the government did it when Carter was president, interest rates are inflation is about 9%, and unemployment's closer to 21, 22%. So if Trump did the stats just counting since he's been in office, it would make him look like he was a total failure. He'd have to go back in time and show how the government lies on the stats. The CPI, the inflation, if you're buying steak and the price of steak doubles, they just figure you're buying hamburger now, and hamburger is cheaper than steak, so you're actually better off. If you buy a new car every year and the price of the new car goes up by $2,000, well, this year's model has an airbag and a really cool radio, and last year's model didn't have that. So actually, you're better off because the price is higher, because they've added all these special features to the car. I mean, the same thing with the unemployment rates. They, you're unemployed, you get benefits for 6 months. When you're off unemployment, you're not counted anymore. They're not counting you. So are you working? No, you're living under a bridge, but you're technically, according to the government, not employed. So, if I'm in office and you're under a bridge, well, I've done pretty good in my job because I've lowered the unemployment rate. There's other numbers you can look at, and the truth is already out there. But most people don't want to see it. The government doesn't want you to know about it because, if I'm running for re-election and I tell you that unemployment's 22%, well, that's not going to help me, so I'm not going to tell you that. And if I tell you that inflation's 9%, well, wait a second, maybe you're going to buy gold and silver. Well, that's going to pull everybody out of the monetary system. It's just going to cause all kinds of issues for the people that are making money from this whole big crisis. The big banks are making huge money. The Federal Reserve is making huge money loaning us the dollars we carry around in our pockets. They don't want people to know the truth.
Right. Good point there. Now, as we draw towards the end of our conversation, want to get your thoughts. Of course, the show is called Rethinking the Dollar, so my goal is to kind of help people understand the dynamics around a dollar through what I like to consider dollarcation, or dollar/education, putting it together. Now, what are your thoughts on the Federal Reserve note? There's a couple people who mentioned that the dollar's too strong. They may want to weaken it. And so there's a lot of, volatility around just, the future of the dollar just this year. So what are your thoughts, 2, 5, 10 years from now when it comes to the Federal Reserve note?
Well, in the long term, I think that in my opinion, the U.S. dollar failed in 1971 when Nixon took us off of the modified gold standard. It kept its value because Nixon put us on the petrodollar standard, and now that's falling apart. In my opinion, hopefully Trump can ease relations we have with Russia and China and the rest of the world. But I think that the dollar's day is done. That the rest of the world is tired of using the U.S. dollar as a world reserve currency, and that other currencies like the Chinese yuan is trying to put themselves in a position where they could get a bigger place at the table, the world table. And I just think the dollar's already failed. And I think, people tell me the dollar will never fail. Look at a 100-year chart of the dollar. Go online and Google that and look at a 100-year chart. And if I told you, hey, look, I have this company I want you to invest in, and I showed you that 100-year chart of the dollar, you would laugh at me. You'd say, hey, well, that Andrew Higgins, he's a nice guy, but I'm never going to take any advice from that guy. Did you see the chart on that thing? That's horrible. And people actually say the dollar's lost like 96% of its value over 100 years, and people say it'll never fail. It's if I told you to buy gold and it lost 96% of its value the next day, you would think that it was a failure as an investment. And if the dollar's lost 96 or 94%, depending on when you're looking at it and who's doing the math, but it's lost almost all of its value. And even if you just go back to the 80s and look at a chart of the dollar from there to here, now the dollar could go higher because the rest of the world is worse than us. They're just like ahead of us as far as how bad their economies are. If the euro fails, the dollar will go higher in value. But understand, the dollar's value is based on the euro's value and the all these other currencies, and they're all fiat currencies. They're all paper, debt-backed assets. So it's like you're comparing worthless paper. My worthless paper is more or less valuable than your worthless paper, and in some cases, they're all going up and down in value compared to each other, but they're all dropping in value compared to the cost of milk and toilet paper and steak and eggs and that kind of stuff. So in my view, the best way to store wealth is, I think there's going to be a huge wealth transfer, and it's going to go from debt-backed paper assets to real tangible assets like gold and silver, especially silver. I think silver is just going to explode in value. I think silver is the biggest no-brainer financial opportunity in the history of the world. And I wrote about, you can go look on my LinkedIn page, and I have some posts on there that talk about it. I have lots of charts and graphs and all kinds of stuff on there that's pretty good resource. But if I can refer somebody else, Michael Maloney has a great video series on YouTube that you can watch for free called Hidden Secrets of Money. If you've never heard any of this before and you're freaking out, Maloney's very calm and in the way he expresses himself, and he uses a lot of charts and has a lot of evidence to back up his conclusions. And he basically, has some of the same conclusions that I do.
Right. Well, Andrew Higgins, I appreciate you taking time to sit down with us here. Rethinking a Dollar. Can you get the audience a way, to follow some of your writings, and where can they find you at, or possibly connect with you if they want to find out more of what you do and things like that?
Well, I'm on, like I said, I'm on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request on LinkedIn if you like, Andrew Higgins, Higgins. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter. So LinkedIn is the most interesting place to follow me because there's a lot of smart people on LinkedIn, and I have people from all over the world that I'm connected with. So you get interesting perspectives from all over the world. Sometimes people don't agree, but they have an interesting perspective, or they have other evidence, and I like having the conversation and learning from other people. But just follow me on LinkedIn. Let's see. Just look me up, Andrew Higgins, on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook.
Well, sounds good. Well, Andrew, thank you for taking time once again. I want you to enjoy your day, and definitely, we'll see how everything pans out, in the days ahead with this monetary fiasco that we're living in now. But thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.